Hey everyone, welcome to episode 1 of McElroy Library. I don't know if I should call it McElroy's Library or the McElroy Library. I ostentatiously and half-jokingly refer to any house in which I live as McElroy Manor. So McElroy Library seems as fitting as any other thing to describe the thousands of comic books and hundreds of books that I will be unboxing over the course of these first however many episodes. I just moved from Florida to Virginia. I'm a sometime English professor and film professor who's currently in between universities. And so this is just a way for me to pass the time and get in touch with that beloved physical media that I haven't had access to for a few weeks because it was on a moving truck. Glad that you're joining me. I've got a box right here that I'm going to be opening up. It's just any old box among the many boxes of books. And we'll just talk a little bit about the books that are in there. If you have read them or are interested in these books, want to learn more, you can, of course, look them up. But you can also feel free to comment and reach out, and I'd be happy to talk to anyone about these books. All right, so taking the lid off, this box is all mangled, as many of my boxes were on the move, but see, here we have books. So I must have designated this box when I was packing up these books as being primarily academic or academically oriented text. Let's see how accurate that was. Well, first off, this is actually a fun way to introduce McElroy Library and the way I kind of engage with the printed media that I love so much. I've got a collection of these dust jackets right here, just sitting on top, because I fucking hate them when I'm reading a book and it's got a dust jacket and it just gets in the way, so I just take them off the whole time that I'm reading that book, and oftentimes they don't get reunited for years and years after I've actually read it, because I wind up putting them in a stack and they get flattened in a box somewhere. But anyways, we've got some books by Will and Ariel Durant in this box here. The famous History of Civilization series. Another one of those dust jackets. Same. Now, I'll get to those books because a few of them are actually in here in a second, but right now I'm just going to focus on the dust jacket of Joseph Campbell and Bill Moyer's The Power of Myth. This was like a sort of transcript edited version of the wonderful, I believe, PBS special that they did. I want to say 86 or 87, well, maybe a little earlier. It was essentially not too long before Joseph Campbell died. If you are one of my former students, or even just one of my friends, then you've heard me talk your ear off about Joseph Campbell. But to those of you who are new, I am a bit of a Joseph Campbell scholar in that I focus on the intersections of mythology, religion, and popular culture, specifically superhero stories, so primarily American comic books and the movies and cartoons and video games that are inspired by those comic books. I think there's a great deal of overlap between the categories that we've delineated as mythology and those we sort of put under entertainment. I think they have more in common than we tend to spend too much time talking about. But eventually we'll get to where that book is, probably in a different box. Here is another dust jacket from A Promised Land, the first half of former President Obama's big official memoir. It's a good read. I recommend it, especially if you want to be reminded of a different time when politics was was a little more boring, let's say. More Will and Ariel Durant, I should say, because eventually his former student, whom he married, became essentially so integral to the process that he started to thank her and give her more acknowledgement, and then eventually she was credited as a co-author in the later stages of the History of Civilization book series. Interestingly enough, just off the top of my head, Joseph Campbell also married a former student of his. Me personally, that's not... You won't catch me marrying any of my former students. I'm already happily married, of course. It's always interesting when we sort of look back at these scholars of previous decades, and see that the social lines were a bit different, right? Um, at the top of this dust jacket list right here, there was a wonderful book put out a while back for celebrating the 80 years of Action Comics, um, and that was I guess that's 2018. Yeah, somewhere that that book reprinting various Superman stories and some little bits and essays and pieces in there. Someday I'll unbox that book, but right now I just have the dust jacket. Now, digging further into the box. All right. So my alma mater, a former employer, the University of North Florida, we used to do like a collected anthology sort of reader situation for freshman writing classes. And this was a useful one called Writing the Cloud. And so I've just kind of kept, those things on hand. Let's see. Unsui, A Diary of Zen Monastic Life. This is just a neat little pictorially aided book here about what it describes, Zen monastic life. Yeah. Here we have a book by one of my favorite scholars on their particular subject, which is, you could argue religion widely, but I guess I tend to go to her mostly for the Abrahamic religions, and that's former nun Karen Armstrong, who became a wonderful academic. This is her Visions of God, Four Medieval Mystics and Their Writings. Strongly recommend for believers and non-believers alike, frankly. I think Karen Armstrong has a wonderfully balanced voice and approach to those subjects, and also we'll get to it at some point, but I highly recommend you read her book, A History of God. All right, let's move on to another one. Oh, okay, here we go. This Helmholtz's Treatise on Physiological Optics. This is volumes 1 and 2. I think volume 3 is its own thing. Maybe it's 3 and 4. I picked this up because I wanted to learn more essentially about the functions physiologically of how we see things. Because I suspect strongly that actually greatly informs our thought processes. And in that pursuit over time, I've more and more tried to look into, without great clarity for myself, yet the relations between our physiological self and our internal self, in the sense of what we take in visually and how that not only is interpreted by the organ called your brain, but more or less what that winds up meaning to us. It's a book about eyeballs. All right, back to Will and Ariel Durant. Here we have The Story of Civilization. I think earlier I called it The History of Civilization. My bad. Of course, we are reminded when I make this mistake that the French phrase l'histoire can be the history of a thing or the story of a thing. So take that. Speaking of French, here we have their wonderful Age of Napoleon. By the way, this series, I've seen it in bookstores and everything. It's a well-regarded series. I've certainly seen it in public libraries. But this particular set, I'm fortunate enough to have because my wife inherited it from her rather well-educated doctor grandfather. So some of these books actually come from a variety of collections, essentially, that wind up filtering and funneling towards me, fortunately. Yeah. Keeping up with the Durants, here we have Rousseau and Revolution. This is book 10. Napoleon was book 11. So we're going backwards here. Book 9, The Age of Voltaire. Right, a lot of Frenchies. And The Age of Louis XIV. You know? That's book 8 in the Story of Civilization. And then a very beat up copy here of a nice little portable read. Greta Thunberg's No One is Too Small to Make a Difference. You know, it's a breeze. It's a little collection of you know, blogging more or less, but it's a really interesting sort of snapshot of a particular facet of our culture and our times. And now, last book in box number 1, we have Grey's Anatomy. Again, from my wife's now deceased, very well educated doctor grandfather. All right. Here we have Grey's Anatomy in a wonderful edition. There we go. That's what you look like on the inside. All right. Easy breezy for episode 1. Slow and gentle. Getting into the waters. I'm not a big cannonball or diving in person. I really like to wade in if I can. So that's what we're doing here. And I hope that you will continue to go a little further with me here at McElroy Library in our following episode. So see you next time. Thanks for watching.